papers and type it loudly on your keyboard may bring the camera onto you. Please also bear in mind that the ceiling microphones are sensitive and may pick up conversations in the room, including informal remarks. We are not expecting a fire alarm test today. If the alarm should sound, attendees should follow officers out of the doors at the side of the room and leave the building via the nearest fire exit, which will be down the stairs into the foyer and into Duke Street, where you should then make your way to the location assembly point in the grounds of the cathedral opposite. Thank you. First item on the agenda is membership apologies, substitutions and declarations of interest. The membership is noted on your papers, and I believe we do have a couple of apologies.
Yeah,
Emma?
That's correct, Chairman. Apologies have been received from Councillor Chris Pond and Councillor Chris Siddle.
Thank you. No substitutions. Any declarations of interest, members? If anything should occur to you during the course of the meeting, then please do so at that time. If we can now consider the minutes of our last meeting on the 27th of February. Is it your wish that I sign these as a true and accurate record of our proceedings? Agreed. Thank you. Thank you, Emma. Item 3, I don't believe we have any questions from the public. Is that confirmed?
That's correct, Chairman.
Thank you. As we move on to item 4, Levelling Up Essex Year 3 Impact Update. At this point, I welcome Cabinet Member Louise McKinley, Deputy Leader, and Cabinet Member for Communities, Economic Growth and Prosperity, and also Rebecca Gipp, Head of Levelling Up Coordination. So, Councillor McKinley, would you like to introduce your item and then whoever take us through the slides?
Lovely, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm really pleased to be able to obviously share the Levelling Up report with you and to talk a bit more around it. And I know from some of the conversations that we've had outside of this meeting that there's been a real desire to see some clear examples and case studies. So I'm going to hopefully try and bring some of that to light. As ever, once I've done the presentation, any questions that you've got, clarification, want to expand on anything, obviously happy to do so. I'm hoping that you all had a chance to look at the report. It was sent out electronically to everybody. This is what we used when we were in Parliament a few weeks ago to launch the third year of the programme. And that was very well attended, not just with parliamentarians, but really importantly, I think, with our partners, both in the business sector, but also those who have helped us to deliver this programme. Because one of the things I've been really keen to emphasise throughout is that no one organisation could do what we're doing alone. So it is absolutely about how we work in partnership and collectively come together to be able to then obviously put not just the initiatives in place, but then link them and hopefully cross-identify people from the different projects that are taking place to make sure that there is that full support around them. So I've just got a few slides to take you through. As I say, these are more centred on examples, and my hope is that the examples correlate with the report and that should then lead to the discussion and the questions. Okay, next slide, please. So this one is just very quickly a quick reminder around the priority places and the groups of people that we identified 3 years ago. So as you will recall, I've said this a number of times, it's all based on data. We looked at where the evidence was showing us where the outcomes for people were not as strong as they needed to be. And it does go without saying that, of course, there are other parts of the county as well. We fully appreciate that where there is need, but if you prioritise everywhere, you prioritise nowhere. So these places were absolutely where we were honing in on. The cohorts, and it specifically says Essex-wide there, clearly people in these groups we have in every single division around the county. So the idea here is that some of the schemes that took place for the with the target cohorts, it's irrelevant of where they are in the county. So everybody would actually have been able to identify initiatives within their area. Next slide, please. So this is just very high level, I suppose, the key achievements. Just trying to condense the report into just a couple of slides was obviously quite difficult. But we've just used this as the headline, so I won't dwell on this too much, other than to say that what we're looking at here is the building blocks for people. So when we talk about more children achieving expected standards in reading, writing and maths, that's obviously about how that then propels them through their education and through their school career to then be able to go on and develop and fulfil their potential. And obviously what that then means, it will be determined later in life in terms of jobs, etc. But this is very much around the building blocks. And we estimate around 140,000 residents have benefited. That is an estimate because clearly we can only use the data that we have around that. And in some cases, there will be people who, for example, maybe accessed a multiplier course, but also put their children in a HEF programme. But generally speaking, it's around 140,000. Slide, please. Okay, so the projects, the first one I'm just going to draw out here is the Best Start in Life, and this was centred on Canvey Island. And it was about identifying children of a very young age where we are seeing delayed development. And you'll appreciate there's a lot of evidence in this space around children that don't start school well and don't start school ready. It's no surprise when you then look at their progress reports, when you then look at their GCSEs, etc., that they are going to be lower than their counterparts on average for the rest of their school lives. So it's really important that we get children in the best place possible before they actually start school. And this is very much centred around the GLD, what we call the good levels of development, and their milestones that we expect children to be able to achieve at certain points in their career. And when we talk about children being school ready, that is about everything from the ability to sit on a carpet and listen. It's about following simple instructions. It's about being able to manage yourself if you need to use the bathroom. It's about being able to regulate yourself and interact with your peers. So that kind of core behavioural stuff that we would need for children to then be able to function and to be in a place to learn well. And as you can see, the 19% increase in those levels of GLD since 2022. So that's really sort of testament to the work that was done there. And it started in Canvey, but we have since moved it to Basildon because we know that the evidence there as well was showing that those good levels of development were quite low in some areas. So learning from what we did in one and moving it to another. The Poppins bursary, this really is two-pronged, I suppose. The £1.4 million is designed to support individuals who want to work in this sector or who maybe already do work in the sector but want to upskill. And we know that there is generally a lack of people who can operate at the managerial level due to some of their maths and English qualifications. And the problem that then creates for any setting that wants to expand is that without having the people at the right level, they can't take on more junior staff to be able to then expand their offer and obviously their numbers as well. And through speaking to some of them, that was very much the piece that we needed to unlock. So we've done a lot of work there to enable some of those who are already working in the sector to be able to get those qualifications, which then unlocks those career opportunities for them, but also means that the setting itself can then expand. So the second part of that is then recognising that with the changes that came in under the last government and this government's continuing with them in terms of additional provision of childcare, that clearly it needs to be there for you to take it up. So as soon as that announcement was made, we recognised that there was a role for us to actually help facilitate some of that within the county. And that's when we put the Poppins bursary in place. And of course, if you can have the quality, flexible and reliable childcare, that makes a difference then to people who aren't working in that sector but need to go off to work, etc., and know that their children are going to be well looked after and have the support and development that they need. So we very much come at it from what it means for the individual working in the industry, but also what that can mean more broadly to the economy and to job opportunities. The next one focuses on it's called Harlow Futures. This was a really interesting project, actually. I went to visit it in the schools there. And it's all about improving resilience, but also being able to regulate, and it all being focused on mental well-being. And I specifically say well-being rather than mental health, because what we're trying to do is distinguish between the two. I think very often we get caught in a catch-all phrase of mental health, and where we have mental health needs, that's obviously a very different approach that will be taken in terms of support for the individual. The mental well-being is about how young people can build that resilience if things don't go their way, if something goes wrong. We all kind of experience that at some point in life. So how do we actually give them the skills to be able to develop that? And the feedback that we got was very positive. Not just from the children, but the teachers also reported that the lessons were running much more smoothly, because where there was an incident, the children were able to de-escalate it rather than the opposite. So yeah, really positive feedback from that. And then the community supermarkets, and I'm sure you've all seen the various forms that these have taken. We've got 2 more set to go, and they should be online by the end of April. But the community supermarkets, the idea initially was to have one in every borough, city, district around the county. To say we've got 2 more to do. In some cases, we now have more than one, because where local organisations have seen them work and the difference they've made, they have then sought to replicate them somewhere else within the area. And the idea is that it's that alternative and sometimes that bridge from food bank, moving people on so that they can become self-sufficient, pay for their own food, determine what they want in their own weekly basket, rather than it just being a cycle of dependency, which is what we were seeing with some people who were using some of the food support groups. Whilst recognising there is always going to be that emergency need for people, depending on their situation. And we've worked with a number of partners on this, the Feeding Britain Group, which is a national organisation who very much support the community supermarket project. And it's through working with local trusted partners that we've been able to develop this programme. And it's not just about food and household goods. I mean, that's essentially what the supermarket's about, but they all offer the opportunity for people to have a cup of tea or be signposted if they have housing needs or any other additional needs. And of course, we advertise some of the other schemes that we've got going. So there's been a big push, for example, I mentioned Multiplier earlier. There's been a big push to highlight those opportunities to people who are maybe using the community supermarkets. So very often they're the same sort of focus group as such. So there's a chance there to show them what else is on offer. And what we're seeing increasingly through the community supermarkets now is people who are coming because they are lonely, and they are forging those friendships there, and they are able to then get additional support and what that then means for them as individuals. So 2 more to go, as I say. They look very different. Some of them are literally shops. One of them is a double-decker bus. Then we have one in Langdon, which operates out of the community centre, but they also have a mobile facility where they go around Vange and other parts of Basildon. So they look very different everywhere, and it's the idea is that it's not just reflective of an area, whether that's urban, whether it's rural, etc., but also who is on the ground to be able to work with us and support us in the delivery. And yeah, they're going really well, and the feedback has been very positive. So what comes next? So for me, this is very much now how we take, I mentioned those building blocks at the beginning, that work will continue. It needs to continue. You know, said all the evidence around it, that children, when they start in school, that's really important that focus remains. But ultimately, this has got to be about getting people into jobs and hopefully good, well-paid jobs. I keep talking about evidence here, but if John Spence was sat here, he would be talking to you about the determinants of health, and we know that employment is so important in that. So the opportunity to get more people within, as I say, in employment, that's absolutely the drive for us. And when I speak to businesses, obviously I've got the economic development piece in the portfolio as well, and when we're talking as businesses, they will talk about a lack of skills. They will talk about the fact that they need to find people who can do the jobs. They'll talk about people who are maybe not what they would consider to be work ready. And and it's slightly old now, but 2023 stats, 36% of vacancies, job vacancies, were because employers couldn't find people with the right skills. So we have got a big opportunity there as well as a challenge. And I think, when we then start to consider how all of this knits together, we will talk about opportunities for more people. Businesses will talk about we need different people with different skills. We are, in essence, fishing in the same pool here. We just need to bring it together. So the work that's being done on the skills side, we've got the establishment of the Greater Essex Business Board, making sure that businesses and industry are at the heart of what is needed and of determining what's needed in terms of skills and the support that they need to give young people. That's very much our driving force. And the Chamber of Commerce will very much tell you that their members say it's about young people understanding what's expected in the world of work. And sometimes that's really basic, like turning up on time, turning up repeatedly, dressed appropriately, etc. And we're looking to see how we can work with some of our partners, whether that's on the board or through the chamber, to look at how we can put some mentoring in place. If you haven't come from a supportive background or even a background where you've actually seen people go to work, then obviously your understanding of that is going to be very different. So how do we move on from those building blocks to get people into work, which ultimately, if we're going to get growth as a county, as a country, we need more people in employment for those businesses to be able to grow. So a big piece here around how we leverage what we're doing, how we can work with our public sector partners, but the private sector in this is going to be absolutely fundamental. And certainly a lot of the discussions that I'm having with them are really positive in that space. So just quickly here, you would have picked up on most of this in the report, but three key areas really. You'll be aware of the County of Opportunity and the Year of Opportunity. So we launched Essex the County of Opportunity on the back of the report. That was the title effectively of the parliamentary event earlier this month. And it was very much about saying, Essex is open for business. We know the challenges. We won't go into that now, but we know the challenges that many businesses are facing. But to really try and drive forward the fact that we, as a place with our free ports, with our airports, with all the opportunities that we have, that Essex is very much a place to come and invest and to come and do business. And as I said, a number of businesses were there, and we were keen to really push that point. On the back of that event, there have been conversations that are taking place, linking businesses, but also businesses that want to work more closely with us. It's referenced here about obviously the Lower Thames Crossing announcement yesterday. We've got DP World expansion. We've got Stansted investment there as well. So billions literally going into Essex, and how do we make sure that Essex residents and businesses through supply chains, etc., can really benefit from that. Then we had the day afterwards was the Year of Opportunity, and this follows on from the reading and the maths work that Tony Ball led on. And this is about how we then move that into careers. So it's what I was saying about those building blocks. The next piece is how do we connect people with careers? And when you talk to young people, I'll be frank, the response around careers advice is very mixed. Some schools do it really well. A lot of it, if you've got a network or you're clear what you want to do, it's much easier. But it's also very, very patchy for others. So how do we link young people up with the businesses to actually learn what the opportunities are? And for them to then make those decisions and choices. There's a bit there around, to coin Tony Ball's phrase, you can only be what you can see, but it's also about raising aspiration and understanding, I think, the different sectors that you can work in. And then just finally on this one, I've mentioned the Greater Essex Business Board. This is full of businesses, as you would expect, and it's about them helping to shape some of that economic growth. It's about them formulating some of the policies that they think we need to put in place. And by we, I mean collective we. I'm very clear that governments, whether that's national or local, don't create jobs. We create the conditions for it. So it's about them linking in with us and understanding what it is that they need, and particularly, as I mentioned, around those skills and that shortage. And then, just finally, it's not only across the whole of the county, but some of those core businesses that I mentioned previously do sit on that board. And we're looking at what they already have in place, because many of these national or in some cases multinational companies will of course already have schemes in place that are very much focused on young people or apprentices, etc. But how do we make sure that they are dovetailing into other work that's taking place? And how does that then feed through to young people and colleges, etc., for them to get that information? And there we go. I'll leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We've got some videos to show if the committee would like to see them to bring the projects
sorry.
to life. So we've got some videos to show if that would be of interest
Oh, yes.
as well. So
Please.
apologies, they're on the slides. So it's the 3 projects that Councillor McKinley talked to.
We'll just get those up now.
Do you want them in the order they're on in the slides?
Yes, that's fine. Thank you.
Anyone can do it, and especially as it's free. If you haven't got enough money, you can still do these things and get a qualification to better yourself. No. Anyone can do it, and especially as it's free. If you haven't got enough money, you can still do these things and get a qualification to better yourself. No, never too late. No, never. Do it.
A year ago, we launched our Poppins Bursary, which is a £1.4 million investment designed to support nursery settings and early years settings with their recruitment and retention of staff.
I'd say to anybody not accessing the bursary or the training, I'd kind of wonder why. Because there's a national shortage in early years providers. Finding good quality staff that you can retain is imperative for the children, really. You can not only earn while you learn, you can actually do a job you love.
We know that investing in early years is so important, not just for the staff who are working in it in terms of giving them additional opportunities for their careers, but of course also for the children themselves. Being able to have a good quality early years education puts them on that strong platform for when they go to school.
So we know our children are our future, and this is an opportunity for those people who really want to shape those young minds, who want to make a difference, a lifelong difference to those young people to get involved. And we want to make it as easy as possible for those people through this fantastic Poppins Bursary that ACL are offering via funding from Essex County Council and Skills Funding Agency.
So ACL offer a wide range of courses in Essex. There's various different courses available, all the way from introduction level all the way up to level 5. So it just totally depends on what your current circumstances are, whether you're working in the industry, whether you want to join the sector. There's something for everyone.
No child is the same. They're all so different, so vast. I also love making relationships with them and their families. It's just a very wholesome and rewarding job to do. Without the support of ACL, I don't think I'd be where I am at the moment. It's free. You have everything accessible to you. What's not to like about it? And it's also just such a rewarding job to do. It's so good learning as well as practicing it every day. It really makes you link things together and just do it.
It hasn't cost me anything, and I think without that I probably would never have done it. Because I'm older now, the thought of ever going back in a classroom just was full of dread, to be honest. But doing the course, I'm really learning new things and really enjoying what I'm doing. My tutor has been amazing. Like I say, at the beginning didn't have any confidence, and each time I've had a lesson or she's been there for us if I've had any problems, she's helped us every step of the way. Without the support of the ACL tutors, I wouldn't have been able to do what I'm doing now.
I think life's worth living fun, and that's what this job lets you do.
I think the children are our future, aren't they? Whitney Houston, but they are. What better place to start than at the beginning? I think it's really important that we invest in the future generation, and we do it now before it's too late.
Worked in childcare for over 20 years, but she'd never progressed with her qualifications, which was obviously a ceiling for her. So that's a really good example there of the impact it can have.
I just adore my Happy Mind. The toolkit to brilliant mental health. I've been feeling stressed lately, but after I have the lesson, I just feel really relaxed and ready to learn again. It's a great way for children to get to know their brain and also have their chance to write in a journal and to talk to themselves about stuff they enjoy. Before Happy Mind was introduced to our school, stressful situations would drag in my bag of worry. I just felt like I couldn't express, but now I know that I can, because Happy Mind has taught me that breathing helps and talking helps. It's really improved my mental health.
Harlow Futures Board decided on 3 key priorities to focus the Levelling Up funds on, which was reading, mental health and wellbeing, and reducing the numbers of young people not in education, employment or training.
And My Happy Mind is one of the initiatives that's been taken up by Durham's Primary School.
My Happy Mind, short, easily accessible lessons that allow children to learn the science.
So I'm a Jaywick boy, born and bred, and I've been working in Jaywick for about 25 years, and this is without doubt the most satisfying project I've ever been involved in. So to see a queue of like 25, 30 people every Thursday morning waiting for the community supermarket to open is just amazing.
We know that families across Essex are making all sorts of sacrifices at the moment to put food on the table and keep their homes warm and well lit. Thanks to projects like this, we can help those families save just enough money on just enough items of food and household goods that they can just about keep their heads above water, still put decent food on the table, and thank goodness not be plunged into destitution where they need to use a food bank.
I'm here in the heart of the Brooklands Estates in Jaywick at our latest community supermarket, which has opened its doors to local people today, giving them the chance to come in, select their own items that they want from their shopping for this week, and then obviously pay for this at a much reduced cost to what they would pay in a regular supermarket.
So it all came from an idea that has been really popular in the north of the UK and has been shown to deliver some really successful results, giving families and individuals access to sustainable, high quality food at an affordable price.
The community shop has finally opened in its new location today. We've had an overwhelming response to the opening this morning. We've had so many people come along, seen all the essentials fly off the shelves. So yeah, we're doing really well.
We've been really fortunate to secure funding through Essex County Council, through the Levelling Up Fund, to be able to establish a programme of 6 community supermarkets across the county. First phase has been Langdon in Basildon, but we're then going on to now Canvey Island and Colchester, and we will be rolling that out hopefully from March this year.
The families have been raving about the prices, the range, the quality of the goods on offer, and also the fact that they've got this sort of service on their doorsteps now. So they don't have to take a bus ride or 2 into town to access those bargain prices. So great quality, great value, and right at the heart of the community.
We're increasing days that we're opening, increasing opening hours. Everyone's just can't wait to come back and see us.
So, I mean, the feedback's just been wonderful. So you just get such lovely comments. So we had a guy last week tell me that he could afford to put the heating on because he'd come and done his shopping here. And that sort of stuff just kind of touches you and you know you're doing the right thing. Very often, I think, in our jobs at the County Council, it's hard to see the end result of what we do. But standing behind the till packing someone's shopping basket, it makes it quite real.
It's really important that for an area like this, particularly with the cost of living at the moment, that they have the opportunity to be able to afford some of the essentials in life at a much reduced cost. So it's a really important part of our Levelling Up programme, and I'm looking forward to seeing how we can build on this. We're already having discussions about how the kitchen at the back can be used to support some of the cooking programmes that we've got planned. And the feedback from the local community has been fantastic, with people saying this has been the best thing that's happened to the area in a long, long time. So I'm really excited about this and look forward to seeing how it turns out.
Right, thank you very much. I mean, when we spoke a couple of weeks ago about the agenda today, I'm really pleased to see you picked up on the point about bringing it to life with these examples, because that, well, all right, we've got it on the written word, but those visual examples bring it all to life. So thank you for that. First of all, Councillor Kane, then Councillor Steele, Councillor McGuigan after that.
Thank you, Chairman. I was curious, if I may, to just have a look at the over 2,000 new jobs created across the period. How do you actually quantify and qualify those jobs? Are they real jobs, or are they tied to the life of any particular programme?
You know, it's a really good question. I mean, in essence, it's a mixture. So if I give you one quick example, we've done some work with the NHS where we supported some young people at very much an entry level. And it was looking at what their skills were, how they needed additional support, and 450 of them have gone on to get jobs within the NHS. So there's very much concrete examples. But what I can do is drop you a line outside of here to give you a bit more of a breakdown, if that would help. And,
Thank you.
And so, yeah, great.
I think if that could come through our officer as well, she can circulate. Yeah, thank you. Okay, and finished, Councillor Kane?
Yes, thank you.
Councillor Steele, then Councillor McGuigan.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Actually, I totally agree with the Chair. It did bring it to life reading the report, and I've not seen, that was my first comment when I read through the report, and even more so with the slides. But the thing I was going to go into, and we are a scrutiny committee, so we do ask the questions, is more about the quantifying of the outcomes. And if I take an example, like from slide 3, you talk about the priority places being Tendring, Aston, Colchester, etc. So something qualified them to be priorities. What measures or metrics were they? And do you then measure again afterwards, after 2 years or whatever, to say, here's where they sit now? So how do you know you're actually levelling up? So is there a measurable outcome? And there was, I think Sam did talk, pick one out there, number of jobs created and so on. Measure of skills shortage 2 years ago. Is there a skills shortage measure now? So there must have been something that qualified those places in the first place. How do they compare now? Is there actually quantifiable metrics?
So yes, is the short answer. We use the multiple deprivation, indices of multiple deprivation. They come out every 4 years, and I'm not sure it's the back end of this year or next year. This year. That they are. The next round are due out again, and that tracks some core metrics within each of the different areas. In the meantime, what we've been doing is really what I've taken you through today. So it's looking at those the key trigger points, I suppose, and the key components around the school readiness, around the literacy levels, etc. In some cases, it has been really difficult to track, and the team will tell you, I'm sure, that I was really clear from the beginning. It's got to be a lot more than, everybody gave really positive feedback and it was a nice day out, because that isn't going to actually lead to systemic change. So when we talk about the positive feedback that we've had, we then try and look at how that can then be translated into something that's quantifiable. In terms of direction of travel. But to answer your question around the specifics, I'm afraid I'm going to have to give them to you in a year's time when we've got the next level of metrics. As I say, it's every 4 years that they get.
So those metrics then cover things like employment needs, skills. It covers those, does it? Yeah. But of course, the thing you can't necessarily link is what the actions you took. How did they then? Each action will have a contribution, but you don't know the amount of contribution, do you? You don't know which is the better value for money or better value for outcome, isn't it?
Yeah. And that can be hard. When we were doing some work with some of the universities around how that can be measured, because if you take, for example, some of the literacy work, of course, even without this, the schools have been doing some additional work post-COVID to look at what that's in terms of the implications that it had on literacy and numeracy. So they, in some cases, were putting in additional support anyway. But where we've drawn our measurements is where we compare the schools that haven't had our intervention versus those that have. So it's the extra component on top of it. So the numbers that we're citing, we believe, are due to the programmes that we've had. So that owns 19%.
All right, so you take the time element out of it, but do a comparison between your...
So as much as we can, we try and put what I would probably call some sort of academic rigour around the claims that we make. But the real test will come when we've got the next level of.
That includes things like key stage 2 and 3 outcomes, does it?
Yeah, it's good levels of development. It's in terms of school readiness. It's then the Progress 8 scores from primary school into secondary school. Obviously GCSEs, number of children getting GCSEs, but then it's also things that relate to areas of deprivation as well. So, and that's obviously much more complex than just down to an individual, whether they're in work or not. And there are other factors clearly at play within that. But then we will also be looking at the growth. So when you look back over the last 20, 30 years, the number of areas of deprivation within the county have increased. So there's one thing reversing it, but the likelihood, it's about stemming it first of all before you can reverse it. So we'll be looking at all of that when the next set of figures are out to try and get a better picture of, you know, A, what it's telling us, but B, how that then correlates to the work that we've done. So it's not a perfect science by any measure, but as I say, we are working with the university to see how robust we can make that, and to distinguish between the bits that we're doing and what others are doing.
Just one question that's not supplementary. It's about the supermarkets. Do you get any pushback from the local supermarkets about you competing with them?
No, quite the opposite actually. They've been really supportive. I probably shouldn't name them by brand, but yeah, in this forum. But certainly a number of the big supermarkets, they very often have more of a community element, which, you know, I don't think they particularly publicise, if I'm honest. In some cases, it is stuff that's coming to the end of its shelf life. In others, it's just excess in the food chain. So, you know, it doesn't necessarily mean the loaf of bread that you pick up is going out of date today. It could just be that for whatever purpose, they've got, you know, too many loaves of bread that week. And they very often have a social conscience wing to them. So if you take the Jaywick one, for example, that you saw on the video, there is one of the you know, leading supermarkets actually supplies them each week, not with everything, but they have been supportive. And how they source their food, just for information really, it's partly through the supermarkets providing it. Feeding Britain have been very supportive as well. It is about them buying en masse at some of the cash and carries, and the supermarkets themselves are now starting to organise themselves, appreciating that together they've got even greater purchasing power. So they can then go along and you know, to one of the retailers and be able to buy stuff at a much cheaper cost.
Right, thank you.
Councillor McGuigan and then Councillor Stepton.
Thank you, Chairman. A fantastic report with a great deal of detail, which was really good and a huge testimony to the work that's been achieved and illustrated by the videos there. So that was really great. I've got two sort of slightly unrelated questions, if I may, Chairman. Given that you've been honing in on areas of need in the last 3 years, what does the geographic spread look like going forward? You focused on 140,000 individuals. Will there be a different set of 140,000 individuals in the future, or do we still need to help a proportion of that 140,000 already? And what proportion of those will continue to be helped by sustainable schemes that you've set up? In other words, schemes that won't need additional funding and will just continue. So I'll take the second question separately.
So in some cases, there's just a general throughput, and the obvious example there would be around the holiday activity food camps. You know, the children obviously each year come through, they get older, they will age out, etc. So in that regard, there will just be a continual supply, I suppose, if I put it like that, of young people coming through. In other cases, and we know this, for example, through some of the support that we've given people, when I mentioned the multiplier earlier, where they have gone on and they've improved their math skills in that particular case, we then continue to work with them. Not just necessarily when I say we, us as ECC, but some of our partner organisations who support people into employment as well. So we will do a lot of signposting that will say, you know, now you've done your multiplier course, we're going to suggest you go and speak to these people, because they will be able to support you into what that then means for you finding work. And that's not about going through the job centre and being sort of through that official route. There are many organisations locally that will support people into that. So a lot of what we do is signposting, so they would go on to get additional support, but it wouldn't necessarily be from us or indeed our programme.
So what proportion of those 140 would be coming back for more, do you think?
I don't know. Would we be able to get the figure for that?
I think we would struggle to quantify that precisely, but we could certainly have a look at that and come back to you on it.
And in terms of geographic areas, are these going to be new areas of deprivation? Or are we still serving those initial priority areas?
So the data, and until we get the new information in a year's time, the areas of deprivation are still what they are today, officially. But one of the things, and I haven't spoken to the team about this yet, but one of the things that I do want to look at is where there are other localised issues. So it's not a case of expanding that list of priorities, because as I said at the outset, if you don't prioritise properly, then it doesn't work. But I certainly think there are, pockets, and I'll use that sort of phrase loosely, pockets within all of our areas where there will be certain challenges. So I don't want to raise expectations too high. There's going to be a whole programme for Area X. But now we are established, I think there is some of what we've already done that we could do a bit of a lift and shift, where we know it's worked elsewhere, and that we can then start to go into some of those pockets in other areas of the county to support people there. So watch this space.
Please do. Second question, thank you. Picking up on you can only be what you can see, which is a great slogan, I love it. We have some great businesses in Essex, and how do we help shout about some of the great things that they're doing and some of the fantastic people that work in those organisations as well? I get the impression that we have a lot of hidden talent and a lot of organisations which are not good at bringing themselves forward, and we need to perhaps expose some of that to our youth and those that are in need of employment. I was astonished by the statistics that you gave, that 30% of employers can't find skilled people, and yet I think we have a huge talent base that can help and nurture that going forward. So how do we gear that up?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, I think there's a massive opportunity here through devolution. In terms of raising the profile of Essex businesses and what that could mean to shout about them. I also think there's an opportunity for us to align ourselves with those really good examples. So, for example, I was in Harwich recently, where they've got the offshore wind. It's a fascinating trip, looking at all the weather, how they monitor the weather, what that means for the engineers who have to go out on the turbines, understanding the whole principle and process that they go through. But they take on apprentices at the age of 18, and by the age of 21 those apprentices are earning £60,000 a year. Now that's something which I think any young person would find very attractive in terms of the salary, but would you even know about that unless someone has actually shown you? And in that particular case, the lady, there was one lady in particular who is kind of the protagonist of the story, I suppose. I think it's much more powerful if she tells her story. She's from Harwich, and how she got into that position to have that opportunity. So I think there's a piece for us to work with businesses and those kind of examples, to use our platform to showcase it, so that other young people can see what those opportunities are.
That's great to hear. Thank you.
Councillor Steptoe, followed by Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Chairman. On the first slide there, you mentioned in the box there, children with adults and SEND learning. How much cross-border cooperation do you have with places like Southend? In particular, Rochford looks to Southend because that's where the facilities are. So how much cross-border cooperation have you had from other councils with the programme?
Yeah, so the programme is ECC footprint focused. But the reality, in terms of us, obviously our funding in our areas, etc., but the reality of how not just many of the services work, but also some of the organisations and groups on the ground, at the end of the day, they don't care about municipal boundaries, do they? So in your area, for example, where we know that we have other work that's taking place, we will link up with them and use expertise and advice, etc. And slightly different to this, but a really good example of that is Southend Council runs the Essential Living Fund, which for those of you that aren't aware, we put money into. It is our fund, but they have their fund as well, and they run it from an admin perspective. And it's for families or individuals who need some one-off support, whether that is somebody fleeing domestic abuse, whether it is somebody who is fighting any kind of, mental health situation where they need something there and then. And they can go to the Essential Living Fund for that help. But as I say, it's run by Southend. So what that then means is clearly we're saving on some of the admin costs, but they can also help then to signpost to some of the other charities and organisations within the area. So we try and work collaboratively as much as we can, but I've always got to be mindful that this, as I say, this is ECC taxpayers' money at the end of the day, and this is about how we spend that for our footprint.
Picking up on apprentices, in my division I've got an airport which I call Rochford, others call it Southend. They are currently going through a programme because EasyJet are basing aircraft there. They're looking at expanding by around 200 employees within the area, right from the cleaners right up to air traffic controllers. And they were having a little difficulty getting some of the higher rank positions like air traffic controllers. So there may be an opportunity there to work with them. I'm pleased to say, though, that they are very proud of the fact that 87% of the employees at the airport side of things come from the local SS postcodes, which is very, very good. We've also got the new industrial area adjacent to the airport with companies like IPCO, what have you. Again, they are struggling a little bit with apprentices. And I found the same problem when I was looking at apprentices. The backup, particularly if you're doing day release, from the colleges aren't necessarily offering the right facilities for the training that needs to be done at colleges for the vocational skills. So is there an opportunity for us to improve things along those lines?
So I'll certainly take that away, because if there's a practical obstacle to someone being able to both learn and train, then that obviously needs to be looked at. So I'm not aware of that. So yeah, leave that with me, and I'll certainly speak to Councillor Ball as well and see what can be done there.
Certainly from my point of view, when we were taking on mechanical apprentices, for me to give them a day release, they are based in Southend, their nearest place was Basildon. And for the young people to get to Basildon was very difficult, and the colleges didn't necessarily offer the right facilities. So it's perhaps an area with apprentices that need to be looked at.
Thank you. Councillor Garnett, followed by Councillor Ball.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Louise. Very good report, very eye-opening. I admire your enthusiasm, which is driving this forward. I'm pleased Harlow's part of the programme. Part of me is pleased, the other part is, you always want your town to be on the top rather than in the middle or down the bottom, but it's nice that you're doing so much work there. My question is, and it's probably the lower end of the age groups, is that we're teaching children to read, to write, and do all the rest of it. How much conversation do we have with parents? Because at the end of the day, it's not only the teachers at school, they should be taught at home as well. So if they're learning at school, then they go home and they get distracted by other things. Are we having a conversation with them? Or?
Yeah. So that's my hobby horse, if I'm really honest. If you get to the parents, I think you're halfway there, because ultimately the children are spending most of their time with their parents, or the adult in their life, whatever that looks like. And certainly if I look at things like the HAF programme, there's been a massive drive to include the parents in that. So it's not just about the youngsters coming in and having effectively a camp and a meal and they go home. They will start to cook their own food, and it's obviously all about healthy cooking, and bring the parents in and have a meal with them. And very often the families don't ever sit down together, so that in itself is a victory. But also that the parents can then see and learn about some of the healthy living and the healthy food options. And of course, if the children have been part of preparing it and cooking it, they're very proud of what they've just done. So we try and encourage people on the back of that to take home some of the booklets that have the recipes, etc., in that says go and give it a go. And also through the schools. So with the schools, you speak to schools, they will constantly say that it can be In some cases, obviously pushing at an open door. In others, it's a real obstacle to get through to parents about the importance and the impact of children being exposed to books and reading from a very early age. But they will try and do that as much as they can. And what we've tried to do is have parent ambassadors as well. So where we've got, it's not just, us or the school, etc., saying it, getting other parents to speak to parents around what they do and what that can look like. And then, of course, do things like the libraries. We encourage the rhyme time for them to come along together. We also encourage some of the libraries hold sessions for the dads to lead on. So just trying to make the parents be as involved as we would hope they would naturally be, but that's not always the case.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Barber, followed by Councillor Souter.
Chairman, thank you for the presentation. My question relates to the apprenticeship levy and apprenticeships, I guess, in general. And a lot of businesses in Colchester, I presume elsewhere across the county, are focusing around the apprenticeship levy and the proposed changes around that. Is that something we as a county have a view on, and how is it impacting our work? Is the apprenticeship levy working? Should it be reformed as proposed? It'd be useful just to understand it, because that's so key, I guess, to getting people.
It is, and it was one of the key issues actually that was raised at the Greater Essex Business Board. So what we've agreed with them is that we're going to take it away and look at some work, because they were kind of making the same point that if we're really going to do this, it needs to be obviously as easy as possible and as flexible as possible. So we're looking at how we can make that work better for them. So that's a piece of work that's due to come back to them in June.
Okay, lovely, thank you. And could I just
Please do.
On, I suppose, the sort of, in a sense, other qualification route around university, I know previously, and I don't know if this still applies now, but in the past, at Colchester Council, we've discussed about the low retention rate of University of Essex students within Colchester post-qualification, or post-graduation, sorry. And I don't know if there was any work we could do around retention, I suppose linked in a set, I know it's not Colchester, but linked around sort of further education, qualified individuals, whether retention of that, I suppose, of that.
Yeah, I mean, what I don't know is the makeup of the students in the university. So do they come from elsewhere to begin with, versus how many are Essex-based originally? But certainly the sector-led work that we're doing, so we've identified through the sector-led programme, which is the key areas where we know that there is evidence of growth in future years. So your life sciences, construction industry, there's a number, I think there's 5 or 6 of them. And to then we know that there are jobs being created in those sectors. I think the piece is then, it's back to this information again. So how do we then make the people who are about to graduate aware of what those jobs are here in Essex, so they don't just have to, go elsewhere if indeed they want to follow a particular career or career choice.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Souter, followed by Councillor Vance, please.
Super presentation. The issue is, being a Harlow County Councillor, we have a lot of children or adults that don't actually speak English. How are you trying to, I know you're trying to help the younger ones, but it's also trying to help the older ones, because the youngsters can't increase without the parents. Have you got enough facilities for teachers to be able to teach English and maths? I think I know Harlow is crying out for maths and English teachers.
I mean, ultimately, I think you've got to be able to speak a language if you're going to be able to work in and live your life in any country, doesn't matter. Without that, your options are going to be limited. Of course they are. Slightly different to the work that we're doing, that would be more within, we've got some very specific programmes that are related to some of the refugees, for example, or those who are here on an asylum basis. There's also work that ACL does around learning English as a foreign language that they would focus on outside of this. But it's a really good point. I mean, you can, and it's back, I think, to support, how do the parents support them? So if you've got the children in school and you're teaching them to read and write, and the adult at home can't speak English, they're not going to be able to give the support, are they? In the same way that they obviously could if they could communicate. So yeah, I mean, it's going to be a challenge, but as I say, it's picked up more from the other side.
Thank you.
Councillor Vance.
Thank you very much, Chair. Louise, good afternoon. Just wanted to pick up on some follow-up bits, if I may, and a question as well. What you mentioned about the Greater Essex Business Board, and picking up some of the questions like Anthony was asking about, do they do a report where we can actually see how they do engage with some of the business how those business generally look to finding apprentices or finding people or encouraging people into work? I just wondered if there was a report from them that we could have a look at or anything.
So at the moment, no, that we've only had 2 meetings. One was the initial startup. The last meeting was to identify lead areas that they're going to be exploring with certain businesses working together, with one of them leading on it. And that's coming back in June, that will then set out the work plan. But clearly part of that is going to have to be how we measure the work that we do. So whether that's directly about apprenticeships, it will be very much be driven by the work streams themselves, and then the metrics will follow.
Yeah, coming back to what Mike said, of course, is like, you know, if you're setting up a board, what's it going to do? What's its KPIs? How are we going to measure some successes? But more importantly, how are we going to find out what they're doing so that we can somewhere support that or find out or feedback some of the questions that's been asked, like teachers, how are you getting more teachers, etc. The GLD, I'm sorry, it went over my head a little bit. I do beg your pardon. I will go back and have a look at this GLD thing that you talked about. But it seemed to me to tie in with Poppins a little bit in some respects, and maybe not. I know the Poppins was a bursary, so sticking with Poppins for the moment. Is that bursary 1.4 million just to train existing staff? Or is that to encourage new staff, or is that to be spent in other areas? Because I note, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I read recently that the government are now going to change the preschool age of eligibility to 30 hours from 0 to school age, from 9 months to school age, whereas at the moment it's up to 2 years of age or something. So I'm getting some feedback. It just so happens I've got a granddaughter, so you're never really involved until you've got somebody who actually is affected. So they were saying to me, if we're going to have to, you know, parents are going to be eligible for 30 hours where they're not at the moment, they're only eligible for 15 hours. God knows where we're going to get the staff. God knows where we're going to get the money from. God knows how it's going to work, etc. And as a business, we might fail. So I was just very interested in hearing what you said about bursaries, and could you just expand on that and how it might help with those preschool?
Yeah, so the bursary is for both existing settings that want to either expand their numbers or, as I mentioned, increase the qualifications of existing staff. It's also for settings or people who want to move into that sector as well. So a childminder that may want to set up and needs to go and get qualified and go through all the relevant checks, etc. So the funding can be used for that as well. And it's exactly because of the situation you've outlined there. So the previous government, I think it was under 3 different phases, they were going to expand eligibility to free childcare. And that was determined both by the age of the child, but also the number of hours a week. And we quickly recognised that there's a national shortage, as there was in the video actually. It's very much a growing sector. So how can we? And it's not saying we've got all the answers or we are the solution, but what can we do to help settings be able to rise to the challenge? And as the entitlement expands, how can we have more settings and more individuals in the county working in that sector who can therefore provide the challenge? So that's why we put the bursary in place. So those settings that want to expand, they can apply for it. If they have members of staff who need to get to that managerial level and don't have the qualifications, they can apply for the funding and the support there. And once they have sufficient people at that level, it then unlocks the ability to expand in their numbers of children, because then they can take on more junior staff. But without that band, they just legally can't do it. And there was I forget the percentage now, but there was a high number of people working in the sector who had never gained their English and Maths GCSE or the equivalent, and so could not progress. So that's how we've started to target some of the work with them, so they can get that qualification, which then enables them to go on.
Good, thank you. Yeah, I was just very interested because I'm sure we all agree, and I heard you allude to it many times, that this is the starting point for the future of all the jobs that we are going to create. And the people who are going to jobs, it starts right there and then. So, yeah, thank you. But so coming back to the questions about apprenticeships, I was very interested to hear what you said about going to the wind turbines, etc. And I just wondered, is some of the reasons why we were talking about people not going into those apprenticeships something to do with the qualifications that's actually needed, and those are prohibitive, and that's why we're finding some of the businesses saying we can't get the people, because in actual fact the constraints that we're putting on, the targets that we're putting on the student to attain, i.e. English, maths, whatever, it's just not working. So we're going around in an ever decreasing circle. I mean, if we don't get the maths but if we're setting the level too high for them to come into apprenticeships. So I seem to remember many 50 years ago when I was a lad and apprenticeships were there was no 4 A levels or anything like that to get into apprenticeships. It was, have you got the academic ability to do that? So I just wondered, is that possibly a prohibitive thing?
So I think there's a number of things here. The specific example of the wind turbines, they will train them up, though they do train them up themselves. It's obviously very much a specialist industry. They will train them up within the company over the course of 3 years. The access, so there is the requirements around the English and Maths GCSE, but if you don't have that, you can also have functional skills, and that's a sort of another route in for people if they haven't got those more formal qualifications. I mean, I would never be in the place of where I think we should dumb down, what are very basic qualifications. Let's be clear, Maths and English GCSEs, that they are basic qualifications, and I think we should be encouraging people to achieve them or their equivalent as much as we can. I think really as well, it's about understanding the difference between the different levels of apprenticeships. You can get degree apprenticeships where you can do an apprenticeship and come out with a degree at the end of it. You can have school leaver apprenticeships. So this comes back to this, be what you can see, where if you're not getting the right information through careers advice and through school, your network, how do you know what's out there? And, we all get that from many different places. It might be your parents, it might be a friend that's working in something, it might be you've watched on the television, school, whatever it may be. But that's where I think, because it's so hodgepodge at the moment in terms of the quality that young people are getting, that we need to really drive it forward with the businesses more. And I'm not saying the businesses aren't involved, they are, they have been for a long time. But there is much more that we need to do there. And as I said to someone the other day who was quoting some statistics to me about careers, I said, you speak to young people and they will tell you that the careers advice is not what it needs to be. You will talk to businesses and they will tell you they can't recruit the people with the skills that they need. So all the statistics under the sun mean nothing, because on the ground it's not working. So how do we actually bring them together and make sure that the people who at the end of the day are going to be employing them are actually the ones that are really not just developing the skills programs, but actually being in the schools and being the ones that can talk to them. And I always remember, I'll just tell you this very quickly, this is quite an old example, but when I was the leader of Brentwood, I remember having a meeting with all of my local businesses and I won't name them, but a very well-known high street retailer telling me that their number one growth area for jobs, and this is probably about 10 years ago to be fair, was in online. People being able to design websites, people being able to sell the goods online. It was actually nothing to do with the high street anymore, because they have people there, they don't have a problem recruiting people there. The skills they needed were online. Now, this particular, I was to say the particular business to you, you would think, well, they're a shop, they're a well-known shop, they've been around started in a wheelbarrow, been around a very long time. So, and suddenly it's all about online. So I think there's a piece here around the businesses telling young people what it is that they need and where the future's going, so that then they're making informed decisions.
And if I just finally, Chair, may just say a bit of encouragement as well. It was great in the report to see the QR codes as well. We talked here today about seeing the videos, and I think that is really, really valuable. How many of us read 10,000 words in the report? We don't, but it's pretty damn good to be able to just click on a QR code. So congratulations on that. I think that's a really good thing going forward. So thanks.
Thank you. I mean, it does occur to me, Emma, whether we ought to ask every cabinet member that when they bring a report, it has a video on it. It might liven up the meetings somewhat. Set a standard there for them. Just a few points from myself. In the covering report, you talk about 140,000 people by the end of the programme. There's also 100,000 children. So is that on top of the 140,000, or are they part of the 140,000?
They're part of the figure, aren't they? It's all part one, yeah.
Okay, so it's probably 40,000 odd adults then. Okay, thank you. The best start in life then. Best start in life section. And we all agree, you know, you need to get those children at that early age, because if you know, the formative years are just so important. But can you just elaborate a little bit on the funding in schools? Is that sort of one-off, and does that go for materials, or does it go for additional staff, or how are they able to carry out that extra function?
Through this programme, you mean?
Yes, sure.
Yeah, so there are a number of different initiatives. We always try and look at the issue of sustainability, which I think is probably what you just alluded to there, that, you know, it's all well and good swooping in September, but what happens following September? And if I give you an example of a school in Colchester that I went to, we provided them with some material and also some training for them to really focus on their speech and language with their reception class. But it very much followed effectively a train the trainer sort of approach. So the funding that we gave was about training, you know, their members of staff, and then their members of staff went on to teach and train their colleagues. And then beyond that, they brought in other primary schools to train them. So at that point, the funding that was needed, the additional funding, was about the materials again. And once you've got the materials, they last for, you know, years. So it was the training piece that was the expensive bit. So by adopting that model of a train the trainer, that's where we developed that additional sustainability throughout the years. And they are now in their third year, I think it is, of being able to do this. And it's all about how they teach the children who are coming in without having the speech and language at what it should be at the required levels of development. And pulling them out of the classrooms and doing it either one-to-one or doing it in groups of 2 or 3. And the tools that they use, sometimes it's Lego, other times it's, you know, it's formal books that they'll use to train them. But it's always with this view of sustainability. And then within the course as well, it's what they take back into the classroom. So this particular school that I visited was very big on forest school. They're set in a woodland, and they went outside. And they have incorporated much of the woodland into their play area and their playgrounds. But they do a lot of their lessons outside as well. And some of the tools that they were using through the one-to-one sessions, they were then incorporating in their lessons, their formal lessons as well. So there was this complete link up throughout all that they were doing. And as I say, the train the trainer module was then about how they would make sure that could continue in future years.
Okay, so if the training is sort of an online module, then you've got it. It can then go wherever you want it to go.
Some of it's online, some of it was in person.
Yeah.
But if I teach you something, then you can go on and teach Mike. It was that idea as well. Yeah. So with the support of online, definitely.
Okay. There's one, you may not be able to answer this question, but one of the quotes about thinking reading, I was quite interested, as I say, you may not know the answer, but it says students were gaining 2 months of reading age per half-hour session.
Right.
If you,
Yes.
you could say, well, they must have a reading age of, I don't know, 45 if they do it for a week or something. I mean,
Was this in the report? Because I think, and I'm going to look for nods or shakes of head from Rebecca and Phil, but I think this refers to some
Teacher
targeted
Roding Valley
work.
High School.
What, sorry?
Teacher Roding Valley High School.
It's targeted work that was done, I think it was 3 times a week, putting the children out of the classroom for half an hour, which is where the half an hour comes in, and how that then translated into their reading levels and their reading abilities. So where they'd started below where they should be, having that one-to-one targeted session to get their literacy up, getting it right, getting their literacy up, and then that obviously enabled them to then catch their peers up essentially to where they needed to be.
In half an hour?
No, it was repeatedly. It was a half an hour session 3 times a week over a period of time.
That makes sense, yes. And the other, just a comment, a couple of comments actually. You recall at Cabinet last week, whenever it was, there was a report from John Spence on an initiative in adult social care where training is given for people who have got some sort of disabilities or learning disabilities or whatever. So there's that programme going on. And then last week as well had a briefing, I think it was PAF, on the adult community learning, and their focus is very much the same, getting people into work, particularly since back end of last year, the whole focus has shifted into getting people into work. So that's young people who are not in jobs at the moment or going on to further education. Then the announcement from Work and Pensions Minister about £1 billion worth of funding to get people into work. And I'm just a bit worried that, you know, there's these different initiatives and they really need to be tied up. And I mean, in the report, it says about adult community learning, is it this page, where they've got, you know, the greatest expertise in Essex. And I just hope that some of that funding from government can go into the right areas where we've already got the facilities. And in fact, they could really do with some extra funding.
Yeah, so we are absolutely coordinated and joined up on that. The new Connect to Work scheme is something that we are working very closely with education and with ACL on. And you mentioned there about the work that adults are doing as well. Again, all I can say is we're linked up there. This is about how we can complement some of the work that they're doing, or if there are gaps, how can we help to plug them? But it's also thinking about how do we, and again comes back to, I keep citing the Greater Essex Business Board, but by having that forum of key anchor businesses within the county, how do we then link up them with the people with learning disabilities who need to have those opportunities? So, you know, I think we are just above the national average in terms of how many people with disabilities we get into employment, but the number is still woefully low nationally. And we know, again, all of the outcomes are so much better for people if they can be in work. So how do we triangulate that, where we've got these relationships with the businesses? And again, it comes back to they need to broaden out the pool in which they are finding people. And then we have a wealth of opportunities sat here with people who just need that additional support. So we're looking at all the time at how we can pull them together.
Okay, good. And then the final comment talked quite a bit about apprenticeships. And it just reminded me of one of my pals who's a big cheese in UK Power Networks, I think it is. And he was telling me how when he was an apprentice, there'd be 100 people applying for apprenticeships. Now they're lucky to get 15 or 20. And he was trying to understand why that would be. And we came to the conclusion that it could be that they're working outdoors, they're doing night shifts, all weathers. And does that not necessarily appeal to some young people? And the same might apply to the, the wind turbines, Obviously that's, going out. All weathers probably. Weather, but the pay is really, really good, as you say. So I just wonder, maybe the career service, I'm sure they do it, but maybe, we could really push that much harder that, these apprenticeships, they do lead to high paid jobs.
They do, and some of the work, when I mentioned about the sector-led approach that we're taking in construction, we know that there are a high number of jobs within Essex and that sector is growing. We also know there's a real shortage of people, not just on the tools, so to speak, but also there's opportunities there for architects and surveyors. So again, it's about making sure that people are aware of what the opportunities are. I also think, and this is just a personal view, I think there's been such a drive to send everybody to university over the past few years, which, and I sit here as someone that went, I'm absolutely an advocate for it, but it's got to be for the right person and, for what they want to do. And I think, we've missed a real opportunity actually to really say to young people that there are some very valid and valuable opportunities that don't require you going to university and getting a degree. And that having a skill and a trade, it's not just very lucrative. It's also in an industry where you're probably as secure as in employment as you possibly could be these days in terms of the demand and the need for that. And as I say, and that's an industry in Essex which is growing.
May I just follow up on that?
Yes, please do.
That's very, very interesting, Louise, because that comes back to what you were saying about schools. Have you got any evidence or any information coming back from schools that they are actually driving that with some of the sixth formers and saying to them, look, you don't all have to go to university, there's a £80,000 route here for you. Have you got any information coming back from schools that drive that?
It's not so much information coming back from schools, but I think I wouldn't want to give the picture that they are not telling students that there are other opportunities. I think it's just that as a nation, we have had such a drive. We had it back in the 90s, didn't we? That 50% of everybody's got to go to university, without really thinking about what jobs were at the end of it and did they need a degree. So I think, that there's kind of an environment, I suppose, in which we all operate now where it's very much about going and getting a degree. So the schools, certainly from what I've seen and what I'm told, they are telling them about other opportunities. Parents don't always see it in the same light. They want their children to get a degree. So there's a bit of a challenge there, particularly around when they're doing apprenticeships or a degree apprenticeship. And I think there's just work that we need to do there again to then show an apprenticeship is fine, but what's at the end of it? So how do we bring the businesses in? I keep coming back to it. It's much more powerful if someone from UK PLC stands here and tells young people what jobs they've got, where they're looking to recruit, where they're going to be expanding, than me or you doing it, or a teacher or a head teacher, whatever, because you're hearing directly from the businesses there. So that's why I think it's about us positioning ourselves alongside the employers. I mean, ultimately, if we deliver what they need, that's going to work for young people as well, because they're going to have the jobs to go into.
So how many World of Work programs do we actually have?
Well, and it's getting harder because, when I was talking to some, both schools actually, not all the schools do work experience now. Some of them just said it's too difficult, we just can't place people. We end up having, 30 children on a placement in their school because they can't find anything. And of course, there's a lot of the online work now as well that we all do, whereas in years gone by, you would have had somebody come in and work with you in the office. If you're working 3-4 days a week from home now, that's much harder to deliver and to offer to people. So I think there's definitely some more work that needs to be done there. And I think some of that, could be quite straightforward around maybe not doing a full week, even just a taste a day for some is a start, it's better than nothing. Or doing it over 2 or 3 weeks rather than just doing it for the full week that was done before. And then thinking about how online does actually fit into work experience, because it is part of the new world and the way in which we all operate. So, if it's real life, cover off being in person and online, I would say, if indeed we're talking about office-based work.
Yes, Councillor Steptoe.
Yeah, just picking up on the apprentices, from a business's point of view, one of the problems I certainly had, and I know other businesses do, is once you've gone through that initial training, is retaining the staff. Going back when I first started, it was an indentured apprenticeship. You had a commitment. I was finding I'd spend 4 or 5 years training somebody up, then they'd leave and set up in competition. So I think businesses are less likely to take on apprentices because they're not going to retain that staff once they've gone through all the cost of all that training.
And that's where I think it's about understanding the needs of the businesses as well. And there is some of the support, particularly if we're talking about people who have additional needs, there can be extra support that's put in for the employer to be able to support the individual as well. But yeah, I mean, that's the perennial problem, isn't it? How do you train your staff and then retain them?
Councillor Barber, you have.
Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah. Last word.
It's on a small topic of local government reorganisation and devolution. Have we seen any change? Because last time, Scrutiny, we discussed about procurement and the challenges around contracts, us entering into contracts up to the point of reorganisation taking place. Have we seen any shift in sort of relationships as a result of people talking about timeframes differently at all? Is there any challenges around that? I say this as someone who's very strongly supportive of government reform and devolution, but it'd just be useful to know if there's been any shifting conversations around that we should be alive to. And also, I suppose, some of the opportunities of people thinking about the new authority coming in, the mayor, and I appreciate we can't necessarily speculate because we are still Essex County Council, we have that service, but has there been any conversations around that potential? Because obviously the mayor's going to have skills responsibility, so it's inevitable that it's something that's going to be discussed about. I appreciate it's a wide topic, but if there's any useful.
Yeah, I mean, certainly on the contract front, we are very alive to obviously our contracts that are coming up, and the fact that when we do move into LGR, whatever that looks like, that the services still need to run on day one of the new arrangements. And also a point that I keep raising is it's fine if we carry a contract over for a couple of years because we need it to be running on day one of the new arrangements, but we don't want the perfect storm for the new authority to suddenly hit 2 years later when all these contracts that they've inherited are all up at the same time. So it's a balance there around how do you keep continuity and the practical fact that these services have to function, but equally not tie the new authorities in for the next 10, 15, 20 years when they may have other decisions that they legitimately want to make. So we're just mapping that, certainly as ECC, to think about break clauses and to try and think that that one might come up in 2030, that one might come up in 2032, because it's not just when they come up, it's the lead-in time. Yes. We will very often start looking at a contract 18 months, 2 years before we've actually got to do anything with it. And that in reality could be day one, they're sitting down saying, right, we've got to look at this contract at the same time that they're taking on a new service. So we're mapping that out to try and obviously do it in the most sensible way possible. In terms of your second question around skills and devolution, so skills will come under the mayor and the combined authority, and certainly the Connect to Work programme, which is all about getting people back into work, that will perform very heavily for whoever's in that seat, because the government have been very clear that that's where the drive is, and I certainly think that it's not just about getting people into work, it's about the quality of jobs. If it's going to be sustainable and we actually want to raise living standards, then it's got to be that they are good jobs for people to do, that pay salaries and that have opportunities for people to grow and prosper. And of course, aspiration and everything is such a fundamental part of that. So I don't just see it as skills as in what you're teaching someone to be able to do a job. It's everything that comes before it. And I guess to go full circle on this conversation, to take us back to the report, when we talk about being school ready, when we talk about GLD, which is good levels of development, and it's the stage at which we would expect a child to be in terms of them growing. And if we don't get that bit right, then the formal skills piece is going to be so much harder. So that's why I think a lot of what we're doing now will naturally fall to the mayor and the combined authority, I think, in terms of the approach. Because if you're going to get it right upstream, you've got to start well. It's back to that piece around mum's pregnant. Right from that moment, what do we need to do to support them to make sure that then when the child arrives that they are being supported, and some of the stuff which many of us would take for granted. Children that grow up when they start school wonder what a book is. They've never seen a book, never had a book in the house of any sort. People that can't sit there and self-regulate, and all the stuff that I spoke about at the beginning. If we don't get those early years right, then the skill set's going to be so much harder. So for me, when we talk about skills, it's much more than just the formal get people skilled up and into work. It's got to be about what leads us there.
Thank you. Well, members, we've given this a good hearing, about an hour and 20 minutes, but it's been nevertheless very interesting. So thank you very much for your presentation and the covering report and so on. And we look forward to a future date, no doubt, when you'll come back and see us again. We won't know what the composition of this committee will be, of course. But nevertheless, thank you very much, and we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, yeah.
Right, next item on the agenda, members, is the work programme and communications review. It's included in your pack. We did have a discussion on this yesterday at the pre-meet, and a couple of suggestions were made, but first of all, I'll ask Emma, just for the benefit of those who weren't able to join us yesterday, just to bring us up to date on where we are and what's planned and so on, and perhaps some extra items that might be considered in the future.
Thank you, Chairman. So at the next meeting on the 24th of April, we've got members' inquiries coming to report on their recent member survey, and I've fed back from the pre-meeting yesterday that we obviously want to have some more information on the response time, and I know that will be brought to that meeting. And then we have at the moment quite a stacked June meeting as well. So you can see we've got 3 items there. Possible that one of them might slip, so we'll see how we go. But the rest of the work programme is there. We did also talk about devolution and LGR at yesterday's pre-meeting briefly. So just to confirm that the Scrutiny Board will be looking at that again at its next meeting, and taking on board some of the feedback from members yesterday, which I have fed back to our statutory scrutiny officer.
Thank you. There was another item that Councillor Steele was interested in, particularly perhaps at some future point on Essex Legal Services.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I came across I've got some issues getting things moving, and where it's been blamed on Essex Legal Services as being a bottleneck. So I was making some inquiries about are they truly a bottleneck, and I did speak to Paul about this as well. It was suggested to me that perhaps if there is an issue, it's more of an issue between certain departments interfacing with legal services, especially more in the place environment, like planning and highways. So in terms of whether to bring ELS to scrutiny or not, it was suggested to me that if it does, it goes to place scrutiny, and we look at specifically the interface and how ELS might be holding up or not, some of those aspects. But when we had the discussion yesterday, and I did feed this in as well, because Paul told me they've got 120 staff in Essex Legal Services, which was quite a surprise to me. I thought there'd be, they just have a handful. But then again, we've got to bear in mind that 70% of services are contracted out, and each will have to have a separate contract and so on. But it was, I think, suggested that we ask them, rather than bring them to scrutiny, Watford, that we ask them to provide some kind of guide as to what they do and how they do it. I think that was the suggestion, rather than commit them to full scrutiny. But I would be interested if any other members have come across the bottleneck of ELS, although maybe I should call it the alleged bottleneck of ELS, because I kind of got a bit of pushback from ELS was to say, well, okay, you were told that query came to us in November, but actually it wasn't sent to us till February. So all is not well with the requesting department. We'll cover that in place, I hope. But perhaps we can just have an overview.
Yeah, definitely. I think there was a discussion about having an all-member briefing as well, which I think would be quite interesting for a lot of members. So yeah, I'll be trying to work on that in the background and get that organised.
But does anybody else have problems with ELS?
No, only that I alluded to the fact that I had to wait 8 weeks for a contract to be approved, which seemed, I don't know if 8 weeks is good, bad or indifferent. So coming back to what you said, I think an all-member briefing might be, what's the scope of what you've got? How many people have you got? How many inquiries do you get? And as you even alluded to, sometimes just a highways inquiry could open up a whole can of worms, or we've got to go and find from these people, those people, the gas people, all sorts of people. It could be that they perform very, very, very well. We don't know. So, yeah, but I thought 8 weeks just to get a license for a pole in the ground, or effectively was like, is that a long time? I don't know. It's just that when you are an individual with a project, and then you get a message coming back that ELS are saying, oh, you're going to have to wait 3 months before we get something to you, you kind of get a little bit of a feeling of like, why? So that's the only experience I've had.
Yeah, okay, I think the all-member briefing will be helpful, and it will cover those sorts of points. I mean, I suspect that on that, I don't know the detail, Councillor Vance, on that one, but I suspect it might be that they then have to consult other statutory authorities, and so they're in the hands of their legal people to come back and so on and so on. But if we could leave that with Emma to take forward, I suspect of all services in the council, they are going to be one of the most busy in the next few months. But
yeah, I mean, Chairman, that's the other thing, isn't it? But if they're looking at 70% of their contracts across the whole services, well, we're going to hit a point now where every single contract is renegotiated. So instead of it being spread over 4 years, gradually they're going to have to do them all again. So that really is going to swamp them.
yes. Councillor Barber, you had a point.
Yeah, I appreciate I wasn't at the briefing yesterday, and just declaring interest because I work for a law firm. I think that the point there, though, is exactly one reason why I do feel they should be scrutinised. We seem to not have a grasp of exactly what their position is in the authority and how they interface with different services. I think we should, as a scrutiny panel, be aware of that, so all-member briefing would be useful. But I do think then, as a result, we should scrutinise them having a greater understanding of the position. I don't think we should just accept a situation where we think, okay, well, it interfaces a bit maybe too complex for us to look at. That is a reason to scrutinise them, and particularly with the challenges coming up of local government reform and how much effectively all departments are going to have to rely on them and potentially other authorities. I do think there is merit in scrutinising a capacity for that effectively as a corporate body, and how does everything link in together with our legal team. I don't think I probably haven't had too many challenges, the ad hoc one, but nonetheless, challenges aside, I still think it'd be a useful topic to scrutinise, particularly in light of how under stress the legal team is likely to be with local government reform. I think it's a useful time to check how things are. I had no idea they had that many people. I agree, I thought it was a handful of people that they were, but yeah, sorry, that's just my...
Without wishing to prolong this too much, I think you might find that their staff actually do work for other local authorities.
Yeah, I see. Okay.
You know, so there's a degree of that. But anyway, we'll get all of this clarified. Well,
Yes.
Thank you.
Sounds like a good plan. And like you say, I mean, obviously, support services, including ELS, is in the committee's remit. So that's certainly something that could come, but I think probably good to kind of go hand in hand with the brief.
yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. So, other than that, it was rather remiss of me not to pick up the fact that Emma was good enough to include in the agenda pack the matters arising, which we've been waiting for some time. And then this morning she was able to, members may not have had a chance to see it, this morning she was able to send some further updates of matters arising, which was helpful. I haven't had a chance to really look at it carefully, to be honest, but the answers were there. My only sort of quick, brief comment was that some of them just directed you to a link, which is not necessarily what I think perhaps we were hoping for. We'd like to have the answer rather than going to look up a link. But anyway, they're there for people. If you've got any comments, perhaps you could make them to Emma in the fullness of time. So that was that. So I think that just takes us to the date of the next meeting, which is Thursday the 24th of April. But please note, Emma did send a calendar invite today, I think, that the time is actually 2 o'clock, not 12. This is in the on the agenda because a change in people's availability, let's say. So I think with that, members, urgent business? No, I've not been notified of any, or exempt items or urgent exempt business. So with that, I will close the meeting at 2:40.